had my ups and my downs.
Phelps with 10 meters left. 3 minutes too good. The crowd roaring. 3 wickets down.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome back, or welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Sanitarium PB and Pogo Physio. I'm Brad Beer, physiotherapist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. The aim of this show is to educate and inspire you towards the pursuit of your own physical best performance. We do this through interviews featuring some of the world's top physical performers and also some of the world's preeminent experts in their chosen fields. Each week, we'll aim to bring you the highs, the lows, and the learnings of the featured guests through various editions, including interest editions, coaches' corners, expert editions, and featured performers. And on this week's episode, we continue the expert edition health theme, and we feature another medical doctor. Now, this week's guest is a very, very, very special guest indeed, none other than Dr. Christina Beer. That's right, Dr. Cris, that's my wife. And of course, I am biased, however, I think she has a brilliant mind, and I know that Dr. Cris's sharings today around all things hormone health will really give you significant insights into this also important aspect of our health and well-being. And for today's conversation, I thought it would be best to remove myself from the bias that I have towards my wife's brilliance, and Emily George from Pogo Physio jumped into the interview seat to conduct this conversation. By way of bio, Dr. Cris is a registered medical doctor. She's a certified expert in holistic medicine, being a member of the Australasian College of Nutritional and Environmental Medicine. And Dr. Cris's message is very clear. The simpler we keep things, the more likely we are to stick to the changes we make. Dr. Cris specialises not just in the prevention and treatment of illnesses, but also in attaining optimum well-being. She's the author of 2 great books, Healthy Habits, 52 Ways to Better Health, and also Healthy Liver. And on today's conversation, Dr. Cris shares with Emily George around hormone health for both males and females across the lifespan, what matters, what to do to optimise hormone health. She speaks specifically to athletic individuals and the unique challenges that they face with their hormone health. They touch on bone health across the lifespan and so much more. So get ready, perhaps even a pen and paper. Here is Dr. Cris Beer, integrative medical practitioner on all things hormone health.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Physical Performance Show. I am so excited to bring you this conversation today. We have the amazing Dr. Cris Beer here with us. If you're wondering, do Brad Beer and Cris Beer have the same last name? Yes, they do. They are husband and wife. So I'm talking to Brad's lovely wife today, and that's why I'm doing this interview instead of Brad, just so there's no bias or anything. We're just going to have a really good conversation about hormones. Dr. Cris is an integrative GP, so I'll get her to introduce herself and tell you guys a little bit about herself. And then we're going to dive deep into the world of hormones and how they affect our body and affect our performance. And she's going to give some insight into how we can get our hormones to help us perform at our physical best. So welcome, Dr. Cris.
Thanks, Em. Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. Can you give our listeners a little bit of a bio about yourself?
Well, as you said, I'm an integrative GP, so I work here on the Gold Coast, and an integrative GP combines the evidence-based complementary medicine with normal medicine. So that's how we function. It's really to try and get an understanding of what causes illness and to treat the cause rather than just the symptoms. So it's a type of, I guess, an emerging type of medicine in general practice anyway. So that's the way that I sort of approach things.
When people hear the word hormone, they often think of women. Would you agree with that?
I think so, and I think women are more open about talking and recognising their hormones as well. So potentially that's where the biases come from with an understanding of hormones.
Yeah, definitely. And you often hear people say, or women say, I'm feeling hormonal, or we get PMS and things like that. And men don't kind of have PMS and things like that. But hormones still play a huge role in men's lives, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, men and women, we have hundreds of hormones, and there are some key ones that affect our well-being, key ones that affect obviously our ability to physically and mentally perform, and men and women equally can be affected if their hormone health is out of balance.
So maybe what we'll start with, Dr. Cris, is just kind of talking through our hormones through the lifespan. We'll talk about women and we'll talk about men, and then we'll dive into what can go wrong. Let's start with our women.
Sure. I guess women, we all know this, but we don't like to admit it. We're a bit more complicated. We're complex when it comes to hormone health. And for women in particular, the start of our hormone, I guess, cascade is good and bad, is when we first, get our first period, obviously, for women, and some key hormones start kicking in, and that's estrogen and progesterone, and to a lesser degree, but still significant in terms of its role in women, is testosterone. For boys at puberty, they get testosterone. So we'll talk about guys in a second. They're a lot easier to explain. So obviously women, we have this cycle that happens ideally monthly, and you know that things are on track if you are getting a monthly cycle, and ideally a cycle is 25 to 35 days. And that then dictates often how we feel. It dictates often our response in terms of metabolism, and it often dictates as well just our overall well-being. And so that happens right until menopause, or it should, and things, as we know, start to change around that perimenopause time, which is 3 to 5 years before menopause actually hits. So women, we do have a little bit more of a complicated pattern when it comes to hormones, but if all's going well in our body, that should just function, obviously automatically, but it should just function in balance. And when our hormones are working well, we feel well. We feel like we can sleep, we don't have the anxiety, we feel like our metabolism responds to our exercise and eating habits. We feel like our periods are normal, they shouldn't be painful, they are regular and predictable, they shouldn't be overly heavy, and they certainly shouldn't be accompanied by awful mood swings, particularly that week to 2 weeks before our period, which is a sign of hormone imbalance. And so all those symptoms and signs of normal hormone function are often very welcome by women, but to be honest, not often experienced by women. It's the very few that have that hormone balance, and there's lots of factors for that, which I'm sure we'll go into. For men, as you said, they also have hormones, and that's important. The main one that we talk about when we look at male hormone health is testosterone. I mean, testosterone is super important. It kicks in during puberty. It helps male secondary sex characteristics to form. It's important for muscle and bone development. And so often men need a constant supply and constant production of testosterone to feel confident, to feel well, to feel masculine, really. And men can have drops in testosterone, which can impair their quality of life. And we'll talk about those things as well. And in particular, athletes, which you don't think of as having hormone compromise, because when you see an athlete, you think they're super healthy, and often they are, but there can be some level of impairment in hormone health due to overtraining and different aspects of training. And so we'll talk about those and how to look out for those signs and symptoms and what to do to reverse that.
So when it comes to women, what are the main hormones that affect our performance and our physical activity?
I mean, we have obviously the normal female hormones, and that's important just for the background level of health. Testosterone is one that allows our muscles to recover, allows us to build muscle. It's important in terms of mood. It's been implicated in depression, as well as in confidence levels, would you believe? So testosterone is important for women in terms of physical performance and mental performance. We have 1/20th less testosterone than men. So even in a healthy, normal, functioning woman, we have 1/20th of the amount of testosterone as a man. And of course that has implications in terms of libido, and women all know that there is a big disparity there. But if women are particularly compromised in their health, very run down, very tired, not sleeping, etc., and we'll talk about some of those things that can compromise testosterone levels in women, their testosterone levels will decline, and they'll generally feel like they don't recover from exercise well, that they can't build muscle, they don't feel as strong, and they may just start to suffer from low mood and low confidence levels. So testosterone is important. And then to go away from the sex hormones are the adrenal hormones, which are also important in performance, and that's adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol levels. They are also important in being able to physically perform, to recover from training, and also to achieve, peak performance. So that's those good stress hormones that we all need. Too much is not a good thing, too little is not a good thing as well. So those are the key main, hormones that we'll cover. There are others, but those are the main ones that we'll talk about, I feel. There's thyroid hormones and things, but we'll talk about those as we link them all together, because all of our hormones are linked, and that's important to keep in mind. We work as a symbiotic organism, which just means we all work together. Every organ has a role that impacts another organ. Every hormone has a role that impacts another hormone. And so we all work together in a state of balance or homeostasis. So it's important to keep in mind that if you fix one, you've got to look at the root cause so that the others are also balanced as well. For men, it's a little bit different. Obviously, I mentioned testosterone, but also cortisol is important in men, so they don't have to look at the other female hormones, but those are also important, but to a different degree, a greater degree than women.
For men and for women, what are some telltale signs or things that people come in and talk to you at the clinic that show that their hormones are out of balance or that something is not right in their system?
Yeah, for women, I see this all the time, and probably because I see patients when they've come to the end of the road in terms of their health, and they're frustrated because they've tried so many things. They're also frustrated because they feel they've had numerous tests and nothing comes back ever abnormal, and yet they don't feel well. So for men and women, the symptoms are similar, but for women, fatigue is really number one, and feeling tired from 3 o'clock onwards, and then you get a second wind at 7 p.m. where you feel like you can stay up all night and finish all your jobs. That's the first sign. The next stage of that fatigue, which is indicative of more significant hormone imbalance, is where you feel tired from 10 o'clock in the morning onwards. And the third and final stage is you feel tired from the moment you wake up, regardless of how much sleep you get. So that's the three sort of stages of that, developing level of hormone imbalance. So fatigue would be one. Menstrual period irregularities, whether it be heavy periods, painful periods, PMS before your periods, periods that come too soon or not predictably, is also another sign. And then you've got weight gain for no reason, fluid retention, acne, abnormal male pattern hair growth, like hairs on your chin, etc., etc. That's another sign of hormone imbalance as well. And then we've got some indicators in blood testing, which of course doesn't often reflect in the way people feel, but we have some indicators. So if you're just feeling a little sluggish, awful, non-recovery from exercise, can't achieve your physical best, there's some indicators that things are probably out of whack. For men, the symptoms are similar, but it's fatigue is also one, depression or flatness, low motivation, weight gain around the middle is another one, sort of that spare tire that happens. And sometimes it's other indicators as well. I had a patient last week that came, and I know Brad's spoken about his journey, but he came last week, 38-year-old healthy male, fell off his motorbike and crushed quite a few vertebrae in his spine, and he was diagnosed with quite significant osteoporosis. And so sometimes that's an indicator as well of long-standing hormone imbalance that's happened, particularly testosterone levels, but there are some others as well. So yeah, those are the main, I would see key hormone symptoms, imbalance symptoms.
What about stress? What kind of role does mental stress play on our hormones?
I know, it's a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? And everyone goes, stress, yeah, that gets the blame for everything. we know that stress has a huge role, and obviously sustained cortisol has a role in disrupting hormones, and in particular it can cause things like insulin resistance, which makes us gain weight around the middle, gives us fatty liver, increases our estrogen levels, which once again gives us those hormone imbalances like PMS and heavy periods and man boobs and low libido and low testosterone levels. So yes, cortisol, sustained high stress levels can be an issue. We've got to have some stress in our life, and that's a good motivator, I think, if you've got a deadline. But if it's consistent or repeated and it's just not abating and you don't have any break from the stress and it's just constant, it really does impact your health. And it's important to try and get to the root cause of the stress, whether it's implied or perceived stress, or whether it really is stress and we need to make some changes, which is really hard. I totally agree. Today's society life, I think, is probably a bit crazy, but yes, stress definitely a huge impact, and probably more than we realise.
And what kind of advice do you give? Because obviously in life we have mental stress, work, relationships, families. Yes. But sometimes physical activity can be a stress on the body as well. For example, high intensity interval training and things like this. So we get into this sticky situation where people use exercise as their stress relief, but can it also be a stress on their body? It's a tricky situation.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it can be. Stress can come in the form of overtraining or increased physical exercise that's disproportionate to the amount of rest that you're getting. The body obviously has this tug of war between activity and rest, and it kind of needs the two to recover, to fully replenish the muscles, and to replenish our hormone levels as well, because we do deplete our hormones and they need topping up. Sleep's important in order to do that, and to release some hormones that are released only during sleep that help to regulate our muscle mass and also our metabolism and appetite. So sleep's important, but overtraining, yes, I do see a lot of that, and there is a body of research around a particular type of syndrome or syndrome symptoms associated with over-exercise and then not fueling your body enough with food and the right types of fuel that you need to replenish your body. So the body perceives that as also another stress. So you see, what I see in clinical practice, and I've had this, so I know that it's a definite entity, is that you're overtraining, no time to eat, working hard, not enough sleep, and then you're gaining weight and wondering why. And it's that frustrating cycle between, you're exercising, you're slogging it out with exercise, and you just feel like you're either tired all the time, can't get stronger and fitter, or you're gaining weight for no particular reason. And it's often that just mismatch between rest and exercise that's needed, and fueling your body with the right types of fuel and enough food in order to do that.
I think we definitely live in a society at the moment where we all think more is more. The more work you do, the more money you'll earn, the more exercise is better. Yeah. But I think we're getting to a point where we need to work smarter, not harder. Yeah. And what role does sleep play with our hormones?
I mean, it's huge, and I think Brad's, got someone to speak specifically on the importance of sleep and around the research around how to get a really good night's sleep and quality sleep, because there is a difference between quality and quantity sleep. You can be in bed 10 hours, but then when you track your quality of your sleep, you're not getting that nice, restful, deep sleep, and that might be because of anxiety, it might be because of sleep apnea or a sleep disorder, or too much caffeine, too much stress. So there are factors which can impact sleep, but sleep is super important. And we all know this inherently, but getting enough sleep can be tricky, whether it be for those factors I just mentioned, or small children, or a work schedule, or just like you said, we're burning the candle at both ends. We want to be productive and get as much done, but then we're not allowing ourselves to rest. So yes, sleep does make a huge impact on the level of hormone production, growth hormone, ghrelin and leptin regulation, which is obviously around fat stores, and appetite. If you're not getting enough sleep, you'll crave sugar, you'll eat that sugar, you'll gain more weight because your cortisol levels will be elevated because you're not sleeping. And so all of a sudden you have a couple of rolls around the middle that you never had before, and you're finding it harder and harder to lose weight, you feel more tired, you feel more sluggish. So there are ways to reverse that, and one of those ways obviously is to intentionally get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night, most nights a week, because we can't bank sleep debt for too long. You know, we don't know how long. We think no more than 7 days we can bank it for. More than 7 days of progressive sleep deprivation, we end up just wearing ourselves out.
Yeah. Let's switch gears for a second and talk about the female athlete. Because here at Pogo we see so many female athletes and they love their sport, love.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've seen a lot of female athletes in your clinic as well. Can you think of any things that women do that they think they're helping themselves, but actually they might be sabotaging their hormone health?
Yeah, I mean, that just as I mentioned earlier, I think overtraining is a thing, and just wanting to be, well, I mean, a lot of us want to be fitter, but sometimes it is about the way we look too. And so for that reason, trying to reduce our body fat stores means we'll also try and reduce the amount of food we're eating. And that mismatch between output and intake can sometimes mean our body goes into storage mode. Storage mode means we increase our cortisol levels, which means we start to suppress our ability to burn fat, and then we create these issues like burnout, fatigue, inability to lose weight. We feel frustrated. Our estrogen levels, production of good hormones start to reduce. Our reproduction abilities reduce, and so people find that our periods become less frequent. And that's unfortunately when we can start having issues with osteoporosis and reduced bone mass, which I have seen. The youngest patient I've diagnosed with osteoporosis was 18, and it was someone who had a delayed period. She was a young athlete, and just never had that surge of hormones that we all need to protect our bones. So she's got the bones of an 80-year-old at 19 now, and I think that could have been prevented potentially with some education and the right help around that, because that can be prevented. But it's not uncommon. I think if you screen the general population of athletes, I wonder how many you would come up with low bone mineral density scores. And so that's something to keep in mind too if somebody mentions that when you're having recurrent stress fractures, or if you're having issues with your bones, you've broken bones repeatedly, and you think that there might be something hormonal going on. You're very low weight, body weight, particularly if you're under 50 kilos, or you've skipped lots of periods if you're a woman. For a guy, if you've been an endurance athlete in particular, you're at more risk. And so it's worth having those discussions with your local doctor and having that checked, your bone mineral density with a sports medicine physician. Physiotherapists could probably arrange the same as well, although I'm not sure about the Medicare rebate opportunities there in Australia, but it's definitely worth having a chat, because I think that it's missed and I think that it can be prevented.
And with females missing their periods or not having a period at all,
Yes.
is that something they need to talk to their GP about right away? Or I think in some sports, sometimes it's almost celebrated not having a period, because it might mean your body fat is really low. Or
Yeah.
So when should they seek help about that, and when should they be worried?
Think if it's prolonged, and who knows how long prolonged is, but we think no more than a couple of months, definitely no more than 6 months. You need to, have that looked into. I have a few bodybuilders that I see, women, and their body fat percentage, once your body fat percentage drops below 18%, you'll have potentially oligomenorrhea, which means reduced number of periods in a year, or amenorrhea, which means no periods in a year, and that's significantly compromising your estrogen levels, which will in turn compromise your bone health. And so I think that if you're skipping periods, and I would say no more than really 2 or 3, then you need to have discussions with your doctor about protecting your bones. Now, whether that is, unfortunately, going on the pill, for some women, they really don't want to do that, because that does protect your bones, because it's an artificial estrogen, or alternatively, looking at the amount of rest that you're getting and the amount of food and all those sorts of things to try and improve your hormone health to regulate your periods again. It's not, I know that it's celebrated, well, not celebrated, but it's more a sign, isn't it, of success, that you've achieved that level of body fat percentage, that your body has shut off reproduction. But it's artificial, and unfortunately it can lead to long-term sequelae that you may be okay with now, but you may not be okay with in 10, 20 years' time. So it's worth having to look into. It can be reversed. It can take some time. It can take up to 12 months. So it is worth having a discussion with your doctor about that, or someone in the industry, as I said, a sports medicine physician, to make sure you're not damaging your body long term.
And when we talk about the male athlete, is there anything that men do that can sabotage their hormones?
The same things, it's that mismatch between output and intake of enough nutrition for hormone health. And often it's the endurance sports as well that can more likely impact hormone health for men than shorter distance sprinting type activities. So I'd say definitely look into it, especially if you've been an athlete for a long time, and especially if you've been an athlete during your developmental years, when your body's still trying to grow and you're also outputting huge amounts of exercise. I think Brad, who was obviously a triathlete, he was doing X amount of training, 15 or more hours of training a week while he was still growing, and potentially that's compromised his bone health long term, which obviously we're looking into and dealing with for him. But yeah, I would say don't miss it. Definitely look into it for men. It's easy enough to check, and hormones are easy enough to check too. So they can be checked via blood testing through your local doctor. So it's worth, it takes someone probably to know a little bit about hormones. So just check with your doctor whether they feel comfortable looking into discussing hormones. We've got specialists out there that do specifically hormone health, and those that have a particular interest in sport-related hormone health. So yeah, definitely look into it. And if you're feeling any of those symptoms that we mentioned earlier, then yeah, I think don't leave it. It's worth looking into.
You're listening to Dr. Cris Beer, Integrative Medical Doctor, sharing around all things hormone health with Emily George of Pogo Physio. Support for today's show comes from Sanitarium PB. Looking to achieve your personal best? Sanitarium PB can help. This refreshing drink contains 32 grams of protein per serve to help with muscle recovery when included as part of a balanced diet. Sanitarium PB is made with a balanced blend of milk and plant proteins, all your essential amino acids, and contains no artificial sweeteners. Find Sanitarium PB in delicious chocolate or vanilla flavors at your local petrol station. Be your personal best, recover and refuel with Sanitarium PB. Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to get back to their physical best, complete rehabilitation, and cross their physio finish line. In addition to traditional session-to-session, pay-as-you-go appointments, we offer some unique and very popular fixed-fee rehabilitation services, including our monthly Wellness Booster packs, which from a low $195, health unrebatable per month, includes physiotherapy, remedial massage therapy, and active rehabilitation, including clinical Pilates, exercise physiology, and use of state-of-the-art equipment such as the Ultra-G anti-gravity treadmill. To find out more about Pogo Physio's services or to schedule your 1-hour initial appointment, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. But for now, let's jump back with Dr. Cris Beer on all things hormone health.
So, Cris, when it comes to people who are training, they might be competing, they might not be competing, but they want to perform at their physical best, are there any tips that you can give people that they can start right now to help get their hormones to the healthiest they can?
Yeah, they're really basic things, and I really wish that, what am I trying to say here? I really wish I had a magic wand, but I don't. They're really, really basic. They just involve, obviously, some consistency and also some general common sense when it comes to our health, and that's get enough sleep. That's number one. Sleep, look at that. look at the amount of rest that you're having. And I think, Brad's spoken about overtraining and the importance of rest, and in particular around patterns of training that involve a certain amount of rest for the body depending on the type of exercise. Eat well, eat enough nutrition to fuel the body, and make sure it's good quality. And we all know what good quality refers to. It's take out the junk, so have good quality food and make sure you're fueling your body. And then deal with stress as best you can. I mean, stress is ubiquitous, it's everywhere, it's hard to manage, but manage your response to stress and manage the amount of stress. So whether it's things like yoga and meditation, which obviously have some benefits, whether it is reducing your stress in your environment by reducing expectations, or whether it is just reducing physical stress by lessening your load of exercise. I think those key factors are helpful. And then we do all weird and wonderful things in the clinic. Of course, we have an approach where we look into hormones specifically, and we supplement where needed, and we balance hormones from a pharmacological point of view. But from a physiological point of view, there are definitely things people can do themselves that I think start at that point, and then have a discussion with someone trained in looking at hormones to see if there are other things that are needed to be done to try and expedite your recovery.
Can we just dive a little bit deeper into cortisol and the effects that cortisol has on our body, and what people can do to try and combat those effects and help their cortisol levels?
Sure. I mean, as we know, cortisol is a hormone that's released during the presence of chronic stress, and how long chronic is will really depend on the individual, but we think more than a couple of weeks constitutes chronic stress for the body. And what that means is cortisol is adaptive initially. Adaptive meaning it helps our body adapt and cope with stress. It gives us a boost in immune system. It gives us an anti-inflammatory effect, just like having a cortisone injection. So it's our body's natural cortisone injection, basically. So it gives us that artificial initial boost in immune system, in anti-inflammatory effect, and a bit of energy as well. So that's the initial effects of cortisol, and it helps us to cope with stress. It's part of its role is also to mobilize body fats, and part of its role is also to mobilize blood sugar, so that we get an elevation of blood sugar to help us cope with stress. The downside of having cortisol elevated for too long is it can have a detrimental effect. For one, it can elevate things like cholesterol and blood sugar. We end up craving salt, we end up craving sugar, we end up having more of that, and we store it because cortisol's role is to store that, so we get that spare tire, as I mentioned, around our middles. We also then have suppression of a few key hormones. Testosterone's one, progesterone's another. And I often say to people, our body is made to protect us. Our body really wants to protect us. So when we're under stress, our body will knock off non-essential functions. And the non-essential functions that it knocks off is reproduction, because it's not essential to have a baby when you're under stress. In fact, it'd probably be detrimental to you and the baby. And so your body knows that and it knocks that down. So if we have lowered testosterone levels, we'll have less sex drive. Therefore, we won't be making more babies because our sex drive will be lower. And as I mentioned, our testosterone is needed for muscle mass and confidence. If we have lower progesterone levels, it often means we don't sleep as well. We can't hold on to pregnancies, we feel anxious. That's for women in particular. We'll have heavier periods, more painful periods, and we'll get PMS. Progesterone is needed to maintain a healthy pregnancy. So once again, our body is lowering our chances of having a healthy pregnancy to try and protect us primarily from a stressful situation, saying that it's not safe to have a baby. The other things that you'll find that will happen with chronic long-term elevated cortisol levels that are subtle initially but become more prominent as time goes on is that it lowers thyroid hormone. So you'll find that you'll gain weight easily, you'll feel sluggish and tired, you'll retain fluid, you'll get thinner hair, dry skin, potentially you'll lose the outer third of your eyebrow. So if you look in the mirror and you notice that the outer third of your eyebrow has thinned, that could be a thyroid issue, and to look into that. And the last thing that I find that happens is that serotonin, happy hormone levels in the brain drop. They're not classically a hormone as such, but we call them a hormone. They're more a neurochemical. But serotonin and dopamine are involved in feeling well, having the motivation to exercise, feeling like you get that buzz after exercise, and then feeling well so that you don't feel anxious or depressed. And so all of those changes happen with chronic long-term stress, and it all starts with a persistent elevation in cortisol. So yes, Stress, huge. Cortisol, huge. We've got to learn to manage it. And how you do that is different for everybody, but yes, it does have a huge impact. And I see people very unwell initially. When they manage their cortisol and we do something about it, they then start to pick up and feel and look a lot better, and you can see it in their face, definitely.
You're listening to Dr. Cris Beer sharing around all things hormone health. If you missed last week's episode featuring another expert edition with medical doctor Dr. David Cunnington, sleep specialist, then you missed a fascinating deep dive into the world of sleep. You are not going to want to miss the teachings of Dr. Cunnington. There were so many. My view of sleep has forever changed. Here's a little snippet of what you missed.
When the alarm goes in the morning, exactly 24 hours after the time it went off the day before, biologically it feels like it's 17 minutes too early, and that is 2 hits of the snooze button. Finding that you need to hit the snooze button twice before you feel like you can, now my feet can hit the floor and I can start to get going, you're right bang on the median for a normal population. So feeling like you need to hit the snooze button twice is being human.
To tune into the full episode featuring Dr. David Cunnington, sleep specialist, be sure to jump over to your favourite podcast app or player and enjoy episode 143. For now, let's jump back with Dr. Cris Beer, expert integrative medical practitioner, sharing around all things hormone health across the lifespan.
Back to sleep, Dr. Cris. So a hormone that I think not everyone has heard about is something that's called melatonin. A lot of us work inside, we go to the gym inside, then we go home and we're inside our houses, so we're not seeing the sun very often. Could you just give everyone a bit of information about melatonin?
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, we don't think of sleep as being regulated by hormones, but it is, and melatonin is a hormone that's released from the brain. It's an important hormone that regulates our sleep cycle, but in particular allows us to go to sleep and stay asleep. It is produced when we have enough serotonin, which is happy hormone, and also enough vitamin D on board, and zinc as well. There's another key nutrient that we can be deficient in. But if you focus on vitamin D, which a lot of us are deficient in. I was surprised I was deficient in to find out I was deficient in vitamin D. I grew up in Queensland, live in a very sunny part of the world where we have a lot of sunlight, and yet because I was indoors for most of my day, I was vitamin D deficient, and I've got olive skin being Portuguese, so I need a lot more sun exposure, which a lot of us do and don't realise that. And so vitamin D is important to regulate that sleep cycle, in particular vitamin D, melatonin production rather. And so yes, super important melatonin, super important to get enough vitamin D, which is also important for bones. Vitamin D actually we now recognise as a hormone. It's not actually a vitamin. It functions like a hormone and it has roles in the body like a hormone. So it regulates and upregulates and downregulates other genes. So yes, important to get enough sunlight exposure. If you can't get enough sunlight, worried about skin cancer, then obviously have your vitamin D levels checked and supplement as needed to top up those levels, which is sometimes what we do. Melatonin, isn't super important, but vitamin D, yes, getting enough sleep is one way to try and boost that melatonin production.
From this conversation, I think everyone is definitely going to get a picture that our hormones are very interrelated. When one is high, it's going to affect something else, and it has this flow-on effect. So, like you said, when one thing is out of whack, we need to work out the root cause and what it all came from.
I think so. But be encouraged too, if there's one piece of advice, I guess, from everything that I've learnt over the years about the human body, and I guess a takeaway is that our body is very resilient and it's very hardy, and if we give it the right conditions, it does heal, and it often heals itself if it's given the right conditions and enough time. Just have to find out what those right conditions are for you. And humans, yes, we're all similar, but we're not prototypes of each other. We all are a little bit different. And so looking at that, but our bodies will heal if you give it the right conditions to do so.
So Dr. Cris, we've spoken about menstruating and women missing periods and things like this, but let's talk about as women's periods start to stop and they start to head into menopause.
Yeah, it's a wonderful time in women's lives, but it has to happen, and I think that there are some key things that happen towards that time. Periods can stop and menopause can start any time after the age of 42, so that's considered normal. The average though in Australia is 50, so that is the average. Family history plays somewhat of a role, but not really. If you smoke, if you're overweight, those things can be altered in terms of timing. You're headed sort of closer towards menopause if you're starting to skip periods and you haven't changed your body weight. You haven't lost weight particularly. You're not under a lot of stress, which is also another thing that can halt periods. So if your periods are starting to get either further apart or you're having random periods that come 3 weeks after the last one rather than the usual 4 to 5 weeks, then that can be a sign that perimenopause is starting. Hot flushes at that time can start, mood swings, sleep disturbance. People generally just don't feel as settled and as well. They find that they just don't recover from exercise particularly well, or they just lack the motivation to exercise. So that can be a sign that perimenopause is starting. It can be particularly bothersome for some women, and some women have a lot of symptoms. Most women are over the perimenopause in about 18 months to 5 years. A very small percentage of women continue to have symptoms past menopause and well into many, many years later. And those are the women that I would say probably need some assistance to try and regulate their hormones, whether it be through hormone therapy or whether it be through some other means. Acupuncture, yoga, meditation has some great benefits as well for menopause symptoms. So I would say that's definitely something that to keep an eye out for. Keep in mind too that 1 in 100 women have early menopause, so primary ovarian insufficiency it's called, which is where your periods stop prematurely than when you would expect it to have happened, and that's what I was diagnosed with at 28, and so it's definitely something that happens. It can be unexpected, but it's definitely something to keep your eye on if you are having hormone issues and your periods are doing funny things. Get it looked into, don't leave it for a long time. So that's menopause for women. I guess a separate entity that I always get a laugh with patients when I mention it, but is menopause. So men can go through a decline in their hormones from about the age of 40 onwards. And yeah, it's considered normal to some degree, but it shouldn't still impact a man's well-being. So it shouldn't be leading to the weight gain around the middle, the fatigue, the inability to recover from exercise. So that's still an unexpected and potentially detrimental decline. So that's something to keep in mind if you're feeling that way, to get your hormones checked as a guy.
I want to switch gears and just focus on you a little bit now. Okay. So if I have a question, mm-hmm. If you could have dinner with 3 people, mm-hmm. living or past, who would they be and why?
Oh, wow. Good question. Oprah Winfrey. I think she'd be fascinating. She's pioneered the way, I think, for a lot of women to have a voice in the media and in society. So I think she'd be a really fascinating person to chat with. I've always wanted to chat to her. The next person would be my grandma, who was one of the founding obstetrician gynecologists in her country of Portugal, where I'm from. And so she's in her 80s now, and I'd love to sit down and have a really good old chat by herself with her, but I don't get to see her often. And the last person, oh gosh, who would I do? I know who I would sit next to. I would sit next to, love to sit next to my grade 1 teacher, Mrs. Robinson. She was lovely, and I haven't seen her obviously for years, but she was the one that encouraged me to achieve and do all my best. So to all the teachers out there, a huge shout out. You make a huge difference to kids' lives. But those are the 3 people I would sit next to.
So Cris, every week on the Physical Performance Show, we like to set a physical performance challenge for our listeners. It can be anything for the week. So what would you like to set?
I'd say for people, I guess 2 things, but the main one is look at balancing your work, rest and play. Look at your week, your whole week, and say, do I have a bit of work, bit of rest, bit of play in here? And just try and balance that out. Now, balance is a funny term, and Brad talks about work-life ratio rather than work-life balance. And I guess that's true, because we work more than we rest. But just looking at that, and if you're tired, rest. Don't push it. Rest, because I think our body really needs it, and it asks for it when we need it. The other thing I would say is don't leave symptoms if they are worrying and if they're persistent. Don't leave it. If you're really tired, if you feel rubbish, don't leave it. If you feel like you're gaining weight, not recovering from exercise, feeling down, low motivation, don't leave it. Your hormones are out of balance. Something can be done, and you don't have to suffer any longer.
After listening to the podcast today, I think a lot of our listeners are going to be thinking, maybe these symptoms I'm feeling aren't so normal. Where can people find you, like on social media, the internet?
Yeah, just drchris.com.au. I do just regular articles and, a few bits and pieces, the Ask Dr. Cris show where you can ask questions and I answer it via YouTube. So, there's, opportunities to do that. Obviously, you can come see me at the clinic, which is the Medical Sanctuary if you live on the Gold Coast. There's lots of ways that we can get around hormone health if you've got the right information. So check out that resource and email me if you've got any further questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Cris.
Thank you.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust you enjoyed today's episode featuring Dr. Cris Beer. Yes, that's my wife, expert holistic medical practitioner. If you did, then please let myself know at Brad_Beer on social media, Twitter and Instagram, and also Christina, Dr. Cris Beer, over on Instagram at _Dr. Cris, CRIS. Be sure to also jump over to Dr. Chris's website, drchris.com.au. That's drcris.com.au. And there you'll find a wealth of knowledge in the form of blogs and also links to Dr. Chris's 12-week online hormone and weight reset program. Please keep the podsies coming. They are always so much fun. That's simply a screenshot of the episode that you are enjoying, and you can tag myself in on social media at Brad_Beer and also the show at Physical Performance Show over on Instagram. Let me know which episode you're enjoying and what it is that you're doing while you are enjoying it, whether you're climbing a mountain, running through the bush, or doing those household chores. A huge thank you for taking the time to leave ratings and reviews over on iTunes. That's one way of helping the show grow. And a massive thanks to those who are hitting subscribe to get the Physical Performance Show into your earbuds each and every week. Subscribing is actually the best way, the single best way to help the Physical Performance Show grow and get into the earbuds of more people who, just like you, are looking to pursue and perform at their physical best. So massive thanks if you've been enjoying the show for hitting subscribe. Big thanks this week to show supporter Possum J99, who commented motivation whilst injured and rated the show 5 stars over on iTunes. Commenting, just getting into these podcasts. Great to hear Alex Hutchinson and his thoughts on mental barriers, and loved Lee Troop the episode. Also great to go back and listen to fellow Ipswich runner Clay Dawson talk about his amazing feats. He's so humble and such a champion. These podcasts are really helping me deal with my current osteitis pubis condition 4 months in. Just got your book as a birthday present. On to chapter 5. Just like a good John Grisham book, can't put it down. Possum J, thank you for taking the time to leave your rating and review. And I do wish you all the best on your return to running from injury. Massive thanks also to the good folk who make this show possible each and every week. That is Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, and Matthew Walding on all things graphic design. Of course, another huge thank you to Sanitarium PB, whose support makes this show possible. Podcasts, whilst free to download and enjoy, are not free to produce. So thank you, Sanitarium PB, for your support. Now, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, we do a whirl through the highlight reel of 2018. We take some snippets from some of the most popular guests that shared throughout the calendar year that was 2018. We'll hear from featured performers, experts in the field of health and wellness, coaches' corners, and also some snippets from the very popular interest editions. So that's coming up next week, a highlights reel package of 2018, which will then be followed by some featured performers, and I can let you in, there's a few crackers coming up. Vincent Louis, French triathlon star, and also Stewie Mack, Australian distance running star. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Deere, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.